Welcome back everybody. In this episode, we show you how to create an affordable and practical utility area in your garage or shed using a second-hand kitchen. All this can be done for under $500 and completed in a weekend without too much fuss. Come along and we'll show you how. Now, a lot of people have been commenting on how neat and tidy my workbench setup is over in the shed. It's simply a second-hand kitchen I picked up for $150. We put some new bench tops on it, used some leftover joinery pieces to make some plinths and shelves, and added some accessories to better organise the space. So what I've done is I've gone and bought another second-hand kitchen. In the end, this ended up being 4.7 metres long, which is a huge workbench really. If you wanted to go and buy this as a workbench, it would cost you $5,000 easy by the time you take into account the overhead shelves, maybe some pegboards and stuff like that, but it's a pretty expensive exercise. Sure, you get much better roller cabinets and stuff like that, but for the everyday guy that just doesn't have the money, like that's a small car to spend on stuff like this, it really is a brilliant solution. Just out of interest, I jumped onto the Bunnings website and I looked up their flat pack joinery unit. So that's the middle of the line. It's not the real cheap melamine, but it's not the real expensive caboodle system. It comes as a flat pack unit with doors and handles and hardware and all that sort of thing. I priced it up, all the lower units, new bench tops, the overhead units, and the cupboard at the end, and it came to over $2,000. That didn't include any end panels or anything like that. So you can get this outcome here for around $400. If you're really savvy and just happen to pick up that right kitchen, you can do it for $300. Really easy. I say $500 because you're invariably going to add a few little bits and pieces and accessories as you go. For example, we've mounted our dryer on the wall, so there's a bracket system that goes into there. We've short-circuited that by buying a new dryer with a bracket, but it just goes to show that you can come up with something really neat and tidy. First things first, let's make this stuff go away. How's the magic of YouTube? Now let's get cracking. So behind me here is our donor kitchen for the new utility area. This is actually my second go at it. I had a bit of a shocker with the first kitchen I bought in that the carcasses were rubbish. I've kept the benches, a few doors, and the rest of it went in the bin and has gone to the tip. So here's my tips and tricks for selecting the right kitchen to make your utility area work good for you. Now, if you're putting a kitchen into a garage or a shed, you're generally just filling up one wall. So look for a kitchen that doesn't have too many angles and corners, because you'll end up with a whole heap of cabinetry that you either need to rework and remake, or that you can't use in the configuration you're going to do. So you want to pick a kitchen that has a lot of linear cupboards like what we've ended up here, that will simply slot all together to make up a great big long bench unit that you're trying to create along one wall. The other thing to look out for is the age of the kitchen. Make sure that it's not too old and it's generally in fairly good repair. And you can generally get a bit of an idea of the condition from the photos by if there's doors hanging off, particularly with drawer units. If the drawers are all wonky and falling out, then the carcass units probably aren't going to be all that usable for you. Try to pick a kitchen that's around about 10 to 15 years old. If you go any older than that, or a really old style kitchen, then they're not as flexible or usable. Sure enough, you could probably get it to work and paint it up and get it all nice, but I think at the end of the day, the laminate is really hardy. You can quickly wipe it down, keep it all nice and clean, it's fairly presentable. Also pay a bit of attention to the overhead cupboards. Make sure they're reasonably consistent in size and that you can sort of bolt them all together. One thing I will note is that it's very rare you can get the bench tops to work. when you're setting up a workshop space, because they'll often have cutouts for the stove and the sink, and they sort of sit in the middle of the long runs. So factor in that you might have to spend a few $100s on some just cheap hardware benches to put on the top, just to tidy it all up. If you're lucky like we are, you'll get a modern kitchen with these adjustable feet that go onto the bottom of the carcass units. It makes it really easy to level them up and fit them within your space. If you get an older kitchen, a lot of them sit on laminate plinths, and you then need to go through and either buy a whole series of these adjustable feet just to make your life easier, or adjust them and build a plinth for your new carcasses to sit on. Now for the fun bit. We start laying all our cupboard or carcass units out to see how it's going to work along the length of the wall. We've got a tall pantry unit which we'll put down in the far corner, so we'll start with that and then start laying things out, seeing how it all fits in. You want to get the first cupboard in and then level it all up, because all your other cupboards are going to flow on from that. Makes it a lot easier if you're working by yourself to pull the doors off, pull all the shelves out, so you've just got the carcass unit to move around. And this is where the windy legs make it really, really easy just to wind it and get it level. And then I've got a small spirit level I put inside the cupboard that I use to level the base. And obviously a longer spirit level that you use on the sides just to make it sitting all nice, true and flat. So you can put the rest of your cupboards in. Now we'll just start laying them out just to get a rough feel for how it's going to work, and then come back, level everything up and then bolt it in. It's a really simple process. You can't be scared of joinery, it's just timber and screws. So that's all the cabinets roughly into place. I've got to adjust them up to miss our skirting we've got where our slab steps in here. So I'll get these all adjusted. I'm going to put a fixed panel in on the side of the cupboard there and then see how it's all sitting. But so far, looks pretty good. Now there's a fixed joinery panel that goes onto the side of this tall unit. So you've got a nice finished laminate panel on the outside where your benches come in and around, like what you have on your kitchen at home, because it's a kitchen. The difficulty is the really high panels are quite heavy and they're really hard to manipulate and hold in place with one person. So what I'm going to do is roll the trolley jack underneath, then I can jack it up so it's sitting at the same height as the underside of both of these carcass units. Then we can rest the fixed panel onto that in this slot in between and screw it into place. So we'll do that now and see how it goes. Cross your fingers, it works. So it should be a simple case of just sliding it in between the two cupboards and clamping it in place. And then you just want to test that it's sitting in the right alignment with the door when it goes on. So I've just got a sample door here. Just want to make sure it's all sitting nice and flush. Now it's just finding the right screws, put it back in. You want to make sure they're not too long so that they poke out the back of the panel. So these are the screws that the original cabinet maker used when he put all this together. So the end panel's pretty much on now. I just have a few extra screws to put on, but we'll start clamping the rest of the cupboards together and fixing them to each other so that it's all one nice neat unit. What you might also want to do is start locating the studs in the wall and fixing through the back of the cupboards into the stud work as well. Particularly with these tall cupboards, we'll definitely put a few through the top there just to make sure it's all stable and doesn't fall down. So as with the taller cupboard, it's just a case of clamping the carcass units together and then putting some screws through to fix them onto each other. Then we'll just run through all of the cupboards. We're nearly done. just been through and leveled it all out. We're doing it the old school way with levels and winding the legs up, and it's pretty good. So all I've got to do now is go through, pop the door fronts, block up the holes, whack the shelves back in, and the bottom half's done. Now, to block off these holes that you get in the back of the cabinets for services and the like, I found Bunnings have these acrylic patches that you can use, and what I've simply done is I've divided it into 9 squares. So I've broken the panel up, cut it up, and then it's a case of just peeling the backing off and sticking the patch in place. For this exposed cabinet edge, where I've done a little bit of a patch, you get this iron-on melamine edging, and you simply iron it on and then file it off so it's all nice and neat and finishes off the edge of your cabinet. Most modern hinges simply click on and click off, which makes it nice and easy. Now, very slight change of plans, guys. We were originally going to put new bench tops on this kitchen. However, the first kitchen I bought has 2 really good lengths of bench top without any cutouts in it, which nearly fit perfectly into this situation. So we're going to reuse these bench tops. I've got to cut one of the breakfast bars down so that it will be the same depth as this bench here, and then slide it across, get it all into place, and then get stuck into the overhead cupboards. One thing I also forgot to do was I got a little bit excited and put these drawers in. Got to pull the drawers out and put a laminated fixed panel which goes onto the side of this carcass unit. So we'll pull these drawers out, screw that on, and that'll keep the end of the bench all nice and tidy. So this is another good thing about getting a kitchen that has a whole heap of leftover laminate panels. You can tidy it all up and make it look like a professional install. So this bench we've got to chop down. It's a little bit too wide because this formed part of a breakfast bench that came out. But we've got the rolled edge that runs down the side and around the corner. So that's going to work perfect for the end of our bench. A few little tips and tricks to help you along the way. Where you've got existing silicone or mastic, get yourself a nice straight edge scraper that has a disposable blade, and you can just run it along the edge and scrape off the silicone. If there's any residual silicone remaining, you can use some thinners or some acetone to try to get that residue off the edge of the bench. Also, when it comes to trying to measure the depth in on a rolled edge countertop, it's really quite tricky because you can't get a tape onto that edge to get a consistent length along the back of it. My trick is to get a decent square with the measurements that run in, and then mark a datum. In our case, 100 mil in from the edge of the square, and that gives you a nice straight line that you can measure back and forwards to get a nice even cut along the back of the bench. And then you don't need to worry about the tape slipping off the rolled corners on the bench tops. So it's just a case of zipping on some screws from underneath to secure the bench tops onto the carcasses, and then we can move on to the overhead cupboards. Now, I've come up with a little invention of my own, and that's using these adjustable legs I had left over from one of the base cabinets, and just put it on a bit of framing timber. So what you would do if you are a genuine qualified carpenter is you would have some adjustable stands that you use to jack the cupboards up and down to get them all nice and level and support them while you fix them onto the wall. This should really do the same thing. So it's the upside down version of winding the cabinet up and down. We're going to use these to wind the overhead cabinets up and down and get them into the right spot on the wall so we can fix them in place and move on to the next cabinet. So let's try it out, see how it goes. For the wall support of the dryer, you would normally have a spacer up the top and a spacer down the bottom to support and hang the dryer off. Because we only had 2 double studs behind, I've actually cut a piece of laminated panel which will support the brackets on the top and also down the bottom and spread the load a little bit more even. And this gives us something as well to butt the first lot of cabinets up to. So I'll bring them over, we'll put them up, get the first cabinet in place, and then it should be a pretty straight run all the way down to the other end of the bench. And we got the first cupboard in. Now we'll do the rest. Clip the doors on, put the shelves in, see how it all looks. Upside down, upside down. Might have put this cabinet in back to front. We'll just flip it around. So you'll see that I put that end cupboard on upside down, but it's all good. We flipped it around the other way. I've got to make an end panel for that. I thought it had an end panel, but it was sort of a packing piece for however it joined on to the old kitchen somewhere or other. Anyhow, what I'll do now is put in all the overhead shelves, pop on the doors, make that end panel, put it on, and we're pretty much done. But you have to say, it's starting to look really, really good. And would you look at that? I found an end panel, which is already made for the right side, and it goes straight on like so. So we'll fix that on, and we're pretty much done. Hooray! And there you have it, our finished utility area. I've quickly added on a hanging rail, 2.4 meters long, which works really well under our overhead cupboards. And that just allows us to do some alternate drying on those wet and rainy days. Something you might want to consider just to make it a multi-use space. We've still got to do something with this splashback area, whether or not we put some pinboard there. I mean, ideally, if you're using it as a workshop, you'd put some pegboard in so you can organise all your tools and equipment and bits and bobs. Go down to Bunnings, the metal pegboards are much, much better than the old masonite ones, and they look really nice and attractive. So hunt around and have a bit of a think about how you might actually use that space. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is what we're all about. Thinking outside the box, working with what we've got, and coming up with really neat and tidy solutions that people mightn't have thought about before. We've got a lot more content coming up. We just cracked 1,000 subscribers, which for me is amazing. It's incredible. So thank you everyone for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. Put any comments down, any ideas you might have on all this sort of stuff that might help others that are watching this in the future or now. And most of all, get out there, stay safe, and have fun. Thanks for watching.